hello, everybody. This week I am incredibly lucky because I've got a friend of mine from over in Arizona, which is a hell of a long way from me, of course, and she is one of the most integrated women I have ever met. And the way she works is very, very integrated. Now, I thought this would be really interesting for you to hear about. And so in a minute, I shall be fully introducing her with the full, in fact, I'll do it right now. She's Dr. Lotte Valentin, and you can get her drlotte.com. You can find out all about her. But she's the director of, I'm going to have to read the notes here. The Lotte, tell me if I'm getting this right. The Center for Integrative Medicine.
Yep, that's correct.
And the Center for Integrative Medicine just fascinates me. And she's does all sorts of things on there, which are mixing both the spiritual side of healing and the full medical side of it. She focuses on healing the patient, not the illness, finding their true symptoms and working with that. And she uses all her skills and her training in nutrition and full therapy and botanical medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy. She uses all of those in helping people find out the roots of their own illness. And she does largely, I think, work with women, but we'll find out more in a minute. But what I totally love is she also does hormone replacement therapy for men. So that is, again, integrating with something that we so often see as just being women. So without more ado, I am going to invite Dr. Lotte to tell you a little bit about herself. Dr. Lotte Valentin, great to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor.
And I know you have a fascinating background because we've chatted before. Can you just give us a little bit about who you are, how you got into this wonderful integrated stuff?
Yes, it's a long story, and I will try to summarize this part, or we'll get stuck on this topic the whole podcast. But in a nutshell, in like 5 minutes or less, I'll try and wrap it up so people can understand where I come from. Yes. So I was born and raised in Sweden, and I moved to the United States when I was 21. And my father was a general practitioner, a physician, and as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a physician. And because I think the time that I was raised, I was born 1958, so I was raised in the 60s. And though women were encouraged to, go after their dreams, and I was very good in the science, and the school said, oh, you should go to, study sciences and be a doctor. I didn't follow that path because I was a teenager, and I worried about not having friends if I went and studied science. There were very few young women in that major in high school. So I majored in languages and business, and met an American that I ended up marrying later on in high school, and moved to the United States. And even though that passion for healing, and as long as I can remember, I would look at people, at the grocery store and the old man with a cane and think to myself, I wonder what's wrong with him. I wonder if I can help him heal. And I just came to the world with that wanting to help other people. And so, of course, I didn't listen to my heart at all. I went with my mind for many, many years, and I majored in business and languages, computer science. I worked for IBM in my youth, my first job out of college as a programmer and systems analyst. So thinking I have come a full 360-degree turn, or maybe a 180-degree turn, is to say the least. And then I had children. I had 3 children. And after my third one, I hemorrhaged 11 days and 12 days after her birth. And I ended up losing a lot of blood, and left my body in the ER and had what's called a near-death experience, and went to the other side. And it really threw me for a loop because I didn't believe in the afterlife. I didn't believe there was existence beyond my physical death. And so it really changed my perspective of everything and how we exist. Then I was really sick for 2 years. I had what's called bone marrow suppression. So your platelets are suppressed, your red blood cells are suppressed, your white blood cells are suppressed. So you're sick all the time, you're weak, you're bruising. And then I had another near-death experience. And during this second one, I saw, first of all, I went to this place, which I call the mid station, because I knew there were levels above and levels beyond. But when I got there, there was this most beautiful music. And this music you can't make on the earth plane. And as I'm trying to figure out where this music is coming from, I see a log cabin, and I open the door and I look inside and it's empty. I look to my left, I see another log cabin, and I open the door, but the log cabin is empty. But then I become aware of this growing light behind me. And as I'm in this light without my body, I turn around, and it's like you become immersed in this light. So imagine standing in a very thick fog, but it's just the brightest, whitest light you've ever seen. So it's just everywhere, and it just expands to infinity. But being in this light, which is just pure unconditional love and light, there is a knowing that we come from the light and we belong to this light, and we return to this light upon our physical death. But in this light, there is an outline of angels, and the music is coming from the angels. But I don't believe in angels. I don't believe there is anything except my physical body. So, I'm questioning at the same time, why am I seeing angels? Because angels don't exist. That's, my thought. But still, this is my experience. So that's why it's so fascinating, because I understand people who have a hard time grasping, could there be an afterlife? Could there be something else except my physical body? I was one of these people. And if I hadn't had these experiences, I would still be that person. So I understand the doubt that people have that haven't had spiritual experiences. How could you believe in something that you haven't experienced or haven't knowing that it's there?
Yeah.
So, and then I see two spirit guides. I don't actually see them. I feel them. And the one to my right communicates with the other one, which is diagonally to my left, and says, what is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back. And I say, no, wait a minute. How can I be outside my body and still be me? And the spirit guide on my left says, if I told you, you wouldn't remember. So they have some kind of control over what we get to remember. That's all I can think, because I've heard other stories that are similar. And then he shows me, it's like a movie screen just sort of appears. And I feel like I'm standing on the moon looking down on the earth. But around the earth, there is this silvery, what I call the silvery, glittery fishnet, because this is 1994. So we didn't have the internet yet. We had no way of finding information like this. So I see what to me looks like a fishnet, because the fishnets are kind of diamond shaped. And I grew up in the Swedish archipelago laying fishnets with my grandmother rowing the boat. And when she lifted those nets out of the ocean in the early morning sun, the water droplets on the fishnets would sparkle in the sun. So that's what that looked like to me. So it's like I'm standing on the moon, looking at the earth, seeing this glittery fishnet around the earth. And the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other. And everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that, I got sent back. And ever since then, that has been kind of my life journey. What was the meaning of that? How are we connected? How does this all work? And now it's 28 years later since that near-death experience. And now it's finally making sense. All that long journey of how are we connected? How does this work? And how are we connected to our ancestors? So I work a lot with ancestral healing too. And it makes perfect sense now, because I understand the interconnectedness of us. We are connected to everything. We're connected to each other. We're connected to our ancestors. We're connected to the animals, to the trees, to the plants, to the rocks. Everything is connected to everything else. Yeah. And we are part of that. And that's what's so incredible and so magical. And when I work with people to heal them, that is what becomes integrated.
Yeah. I do understand that. I've had near-death experiences too, but not like yours. We all have different, unique ones, our own. But the idea of the web, the net, I've always had that too. And this total interconnection thing, I find it on the other side of that with a lot of my work, because I do a lot of work with ecology and gardens and plants and all that kind of thing. And I'm sure our listeners have heard of things like the Wood Wide Web, of the fungus, and the fungus that connects everything. And once upon a time, before we started digging the earth so much, it connected every part of the earth. And it's sort of like, that's the physical side of this energy web, I suppose you'd call it, that connects us all. So I just feel so strongly with you on that. And it is all about this connection that we heal. But you do more and different stuff than I do with it, because you bring in all the medical stuff as well, don't you? And you integrate that into the web. So tell me.
Yes. So, everything is connected to everything else. And when people get, physically sick, we are, of course, physically sick. And I want to say, everybody that's out there struggling with physical illness, I often get patients and clients that I work with spiritually, and they will tell me, when I work as a medical medium or medical intuitive, I can heal this. I'm spiritual. I'll pray more. I'll meditate more. And I tell them, okay, so we have a physical problem and we need to heal it with our physical tools. This is your physical body. You have to use things that are available. And sometimes that is harsh pharmaceuticals like chemotherapy. You know what? That could be that person's best choice. And everybody's different. And I get a lot of people saying, my sister has cancer, but my friend healed with carrot juice or juicing. Yes, that can help a lot of people. It doesn't mean you're going to heal from that. And every person is unique and individual, and what it is that they need on their healing journey. So for people out there that are sick and debating what kind of method to use, I would say sometimes botanical medicine is great. Sometimes homeopathy is great. Sometimes acupuncture is great. Sometimes pharmaceuticals is your best choice. So you have to look at your own picture and how your body responds. We don't know, what ticket you hold. That's why I say, what ticket did you take when you incarnated? Did you take the chemotherapy ticket, or did you take the botanical or herbal medicine ticket? We don't know which ticket you hold. And so you have to use all the tools.
Yeah.
But then when you are on this healing journey and you're using the different, physical tools, there is also this other part to why we got sick in the first place. And is it genetic? Is it ancestral? Is it the environment? If you have mold toxicity, you were obviously exposed to mold, right? If you have an environmental issue, you have heavy metals in your body, it's because you worked on those airplanes when you were in the military, right? There are reasons why we get sick that are physical or environmental or genetic. And there is also reasons why we get sick because of our own trauma and our ancestral trauma and our own trauma in childhood, and the way we have dealt with these traumatic experiences. And there is research on why certain people get certain diseases, right? Anybody who has heard of Dr. Gabor's work, Gabor Mate, his fascinating work. His last book was The Myth of Normal. And he has a book which is called When the Body Says No. And in that book, he discloses of a lot of research that was done and how people, for example, that have ALS, which is a terrible disease, and how they're all so nice. And it, like all the physicians know, like people with ALS, those are the nicest people. And they did research on that. And so there is, poor boundary structure. They help everybody else, but they don't take care of themselves. So is there another component to why we get sick? Yes. And for those who read The Honeymoon Effect, The Science of Creating Heaven on Earth by Bruce Lipton, where they grew different cells in different environments. So they grew muscle, fat, and bone cells in these petri dishes, and it grew different kinds of cells based on the environment that this petri dish was in. You know, what does that tell you? So we are, of course, affected by the environment. We're affected by our own childhood trauma. And sometimes to heal, we have to use the physical medicine, pharmaceuticals and botanical medicine, etc. But to really remove the obstacle, we may also have to work spiritually, such as with ancestral healing, and understand what happened to my parents and what happened to me as a child. How do I deal with my emotions? How do I deal with certain difficulties? And there's patterns within families that tend to repeat themselves, but the diseases also repeat themselves, even though we don't have a genetic marker for it. Maybe there is a genetic marker, or maybe it's just from the environment that we're in, and then that creates certain diseases. So we are, I know, integrative spiritual creatures, and I think it's the only way we can really create true healing is to work, you know, with the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual all together, and not just do one. Don't just do spiritual. Don't just do pharmaceutical. You know what I'm saying? It's just an integrative approach if you're truly going to heal and get well. And some people may never get well. Maybe that's the ticket they drew to have a life with a condition, so they have to be dependent on other people in this life. You know, what do we incarnate for?
I'm totally with you on that. And with your very last point, I mean, these are my hands, people. This is the only bit you can see. I've got rheumatoid arthritis and osteoporosis in every joint of my body. That's very unlikely. I'm not good at saying never. I expect you're not either. It's very unlikely that I will ever not have them. And looking back over my life, I've had them since 1982 now. They have given me so many opportunities, as well as a lot of pain and difficulty and stopping me doing things that I used to love doing and all that kind of thing. And so I'm totally with you on, you may not physically get well, but you will be well as a whole person. And I'm totally again with you on the pharmaceuticals. I can't actually cope with this disease without the pharmaceuticals, as well as everything else. And when I was brought up in, my dad and family and everybody said, we live in an and universe, not an either or one. And to me, that's so much what it's about. So, you know, as you can tell, I love talking with Lotte. She's gorgeous. And she's got so much to tell us on this kind of thing. But with I know you do this kind of thing with people, and you were talking about the ancestral healing, and Lotte has got a fantastic summit coming up shortly on ancestral healing. It's free, am I right, Lotte?
Yep, it's free.
Yep. 3 days, end of the month. Details will all be in the show notes. And it's absolutely amazing. But I was reading about it today, and you talk about the mother wound, and something that has been happening for me particularly over the past 18 months with my own clients. I'm a psychotherapist and coach as well, as you know, is something they call the witch wound. And I love the term, and some parts of it do relate to ancestral healing, because both in your country and in mine, witches were persecuted, for instance, and so there's a lot of ancestral wound in there. But the witch wound seems to me, from my experience, to go a bit further, in that it's really, really deep, possibly thousands of years old, because it seems particularly to relate to where women can't stand up for themselves and feel squashed, and I can't say that, I can't do that, all of this stuff, which I'm sure you meet. What's your opinion on that, Lotte?
Yes. So in my world, that would be called a mother wound. And
I wondered about that. Right.
yeah, but
Yes.
I can see where it's going, the witch wound, because when I work with a mother wound, and it's a man or a woman can have a mother wound, number one.
Yeah.
And it depends on a lot of different things, but the mother wound, let's go back to that. If you have a hard time stepping into yourself, where does that come from? Well, it comes from your ancestors, number one, the way that you were raised as a young child, and how you interacted, if you look at it from a psychotherapeutic standpoint, because ancestral healing is a form of counseling. So in my world, it has become integrated, with a lot of different things, the way I view it. But that mother wound can come from you're not seen, you're not heard as a child, you're pleasing your mother to gain love and affection. You were separated from mother. Mother was in the hospital after your birth, or you were in the ICU. Mother had to return to work. She couldn't care for you. Or you just felt it was a mismatch. You just felt like your mom didn't really understand you or didn't see you for who you are. Your mother may have been preoccupied. She might have had some form of addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. So there are many different ways that this wound can come up. I think that the funniest part is when I work with people and they say, no, it's definitely not ancestral. My family was great. My family was like Leave It to Beaver, like the old TV show. And it was just perfect. And I said, okay, I know it was perfect. Now I really know you have an ancestral mother wound because you're not even seeing it yet, right? That perfection. When you think back, and kind of, it's very similar to myself. When I studied ancestral healing for months with Mark Boleyn, who is what I consider like the father of ancestral healing. He's trained, we were 200 people in his class, physicians and counselors from around the world. And so he is I would say, the person who has really paved the way for this type of healing. But when you work with people, where was I going with this? We were talking about I want to make sure I mention Mark Boleyn because he is the person who trained.
Yes, he is indeed.
But that integration of the mother wound. So when you have a mother wound, you might not have been seen and heard. And so when I started down that path myself, I said, my parents were perfect. My mom was perfect. She was so loving, so nurturing, right? And so we still can have a mother wound. And it wasn't until I started peeling back that onion that I realized, oh, wait a second. I was raised in the 1960s. Everything, girls don't talk back to their mothers. Girls do what they're told to do. Girls be quiet. Girls are neat. Girls don't, have,
absolutely,
they're clean, they're neat. They keep the napkin in their lap. And even though my mom was very loving and very nurturing, I was very different from my mom. I had 3 older brothers, and of all the kids, I was the one who was like my dad. But he was also the one that was the physician. I look like my dad. I'm very much like my dad. So I always felt my mom didn't really understand who I was at the core, though she was very loving, very nurturing. Could I have asked for a better mom? No, I would say no. My mom was amazing. But that feeling of not being seen and heard, then you grow up with that. Well, that relationship you had with your mom is all about pleasing. It's all about doing the right thing, getting love and praise in return for being the good little girl. That the good little girl doesn't speak up. It doesn't stand on her own feet, right? Versus a boy who is more likely to be heard and seen in those instances for the generation that I'm in.
Yeah.
So then when you grow up, you have a hard time stepping into yourself. And even if you had that loving, nurturing mother, there may still be issues that's causing you not to be able to take that step and feel that power. And then typically, it goes back. So regardless whether you had this loving, nurturing mother, or if you had a mother that was, had addiction problems or didn't care about you or had all these other issues, typically what I see when I work with people is that it's a repetition of the pattern with it for generations. Your mom, the client's mother's mother is the same as the client's mother. The client's grandmother, and then the client's grandmother's mother is the same as the client's grandmother. And that pattern just repeats generation after generation after generation. So when you talk about the witch wound, the way I think, because I have people say, I know I was a witch a long time ago, and I'm not seen, I'm not heard. And it's almost like that pattern is just repeating.
Yes.
Women are put in their place. We're scary. Women are scary when you look at it. Women, bleed
yes.
once a month and they're still walking,
Yeah, indeed.
So
yeah. No, I agree. While you were talking, particular thing came up for me. My mother died of cancer when I was 3.5. And so I didn't have a mother, and I had a stepmother from when I was 8, and she was lovely. She was a really gorgeous woman and all that sort of thing. But so that was sort of not bad at all. And my dad was great, all this. But I remember when I went to work, and I was working, I've been working a few years, 2 or 3 years, when the Equal Pay for Women Act came in Britain. And my dad, as I say, a great guy. He was all into the spiritual stuff himself as well. But I said, "Oh, great, Dad, we're getting equal pay now. How can you be getting equal pay? You're a woman." And he said that. And I didn't click it properly at the time, other than like, ooh, kind of feeling. But thinking about it now, since I did the psychology degree years later, yeah. And that was in him, of course, all the way through his life, all the way through my growing up. And like you say, everything feels good, and you don't realize that these things are happening until you actually come to think back against them. I find this with clients too, exactly the same as you, that they, oh no, everything was fine. It was all hunky-dory. I love my parents. They're really great people. And then they start digging and start looking, and they find, actually, and so, yeah, I thought it might be this similar thing like that. So I'm really glad to know. And this is going to be one of the things you're talking about on the ancestral healing thing, isn't it?
mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, ancestral healing is fascinating because they've done research on it. So there's a couple of studies, and you can go to my website. If you click on Work Spiritually with Dr. Lotte, and then you click on ancestral healing, it'll take you to that page. And there are links to these studies and some more studies on that website. But I would say the most fascinating study is, well, there's actually two, epigenetic inheritance of ancestral odor fear conditioning, which was published back in 2013 in Nature of Neuroscience. And it was a study that was led by Brian Diaz at the Emory University School of Medicine in Georgia. And they took male mice, and they exposed them to a cherry blossom smell. And then every time they smelled the cherry blossom, they would give them a little electric shock. Ow. So the male mice learned to fear the cherry blossom smell, because every time they smelled it, they knew they were going to get an electric shock. Then they took the sperm from the male mice, artificially inseminated the female mice. That female mice gave birth to little mice pups. And those mice pups and the offspring of the mice pups, all were jumpy, or had a fear of the cherry blossom smell, even though they had never smelled it themselves. Their mother had never smelled it. It was transferred on the DNA from the sperm of the male mice. So not only were they more jumpy, but it was a receptor called the M71 receptor, and they had more of these M71 receptors, meaning that they could detect the cherry blossom smell at even lower levels than the father mice. So when you look at people, when I work with people and they say, I have anxiety for let's say a common one, loud noises or sirens, but they didn't have a traumatic experience themselves. They were never in a car accident or in a situation where there was a lot of ambulance or sirens or fire trucks, right? Or in a fire. So then you're saying, well, where is it coming from? And then you start digging. Well, grandpa was in World War II. And, every time the sirens went off, the airplanes were coming in, he thought, this is it. I'm going to die. This is the day I die. So when you think of the mice pups,
Yeah.
did he upregulate those those receptors for being looking out for sirens and being alert all the time? So when you look at it that way, you understand that that it's transferred down to the DNA. But they've also done human studies, and they did a Holocaust exposure induced intergenerational effects on the FKBP5 methylation gene. And what they found is they took people from the Holocaust that had survived, and they could see that these the markers on this gene was transferred down to the grandchildren. And I think that's how far we've gotten now. So I guess we're waiting for the grandchildren to have kids. But that it was actually transferred on the DNA. So when we talk about issues that we don't know why we have that issue, then look somewhere else. You this disease or this problem didn't come from your own experience.
No.
So
exactly.
where is it coming from then? Why are we having this issue? And that's when you start looking at the ancestral part and say, okay, what happened with the ancestors? And in the ancestral healing, it is the traumatic event. So it's the actions, reactions, and interactions that our forefathers had, our grandmoms and dads, grandparents and aunts and uncles, right? Those experiences that they had that weren't resolved, or the way I look at it, caused a disequilibrium in the universe itself. Is an energetic disequilibrium. It could be somebody who experienced deep grief, wrongdoings in life, and had guilt feelings about that. And then that gets actually transferred down. And so I say things get transferred energetically because we are all connected through time and space.
I was just thinking precisely that. This DNA transfer, but it's also happening in what you described as the net. So that is linked. So the one is going to the other, is coming back, is going to the other, is coming back. And I think through these studies, hopefully, and through the summits such as you're having, people are getting the hang of this, that it isn't just one thing. There isn't a sort of silver bullet answer to this. It's this plus this plus this plus this plus this.
Yes, exactly. It's never just one thing. I think we're trained our minds from being schooled. There was only one answer that's correct. Since kindergarten. But in this case, there's many answers that are correct, and they're all correct. It's a multiple choice question.
And it's a multiple answer question as well. I'm married to an ex-particle physicist and mathematician. He's not as hot as he used to be 20 years ago now, but he knows his stuff, and he can talk about it so that I can understand. And when you actually look at it, like in astrophysics, say, or something, or in some mathematics, you get this and this chap called Booles, Georges Booles, who you can't solve anything with only one system, and he proves that mathematically. And I loved it when Paul was telling me this. And so I think it's exactly the same. And I think we've got too narrow. And things like your summits and the work we both do is starting to open people up and say, no, you've got to take all of these things into consideration. That is just so important. And I think it is to you. I mean, as I said at the beginning, you're one of the most integrated women I've ever met. And it's how we all ought to be. We need to get there. We need to open up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is what we're living through right now, is that the portal, so to speak. We are all opening up, I think, across the world. We're starting to understand that we are more than just our physical body. And there is there is a need for understanding shamanism and our roots and where we came from, and an integration of the Western world and the more traditional world, or South America, original traditions with Aboriginal people that are still carrying this wisdom and this knowledge that we need to learn as the Western people. We need to learn how to integrate that
Yeah.
To get to the next level of consciousness, so to speak.
Yeah. And just to open up in that way. I mean, there's the same thing in Europe and in my own country, in Britain here. There are a lot of us who we don't particularly look different. We just, look like this, I've got my sweater on and my hair and my glasses and that. But our ancestors and our upbringing has kept this knowledge alive. And now it's getting wanted. And this seems to be happening all around the world, which I think is marvelous and well timed for it. Lotte, tell us a little bit about these, because actually I didn't realize when I started this, there are actually 3 summits that Lotte is doing, all of them 3. So I'm going to have horribly busy weekends, these weekends. Tell us about them.
So the Shift Network one, it's a very large organization, so many people know about that. To sign up for that, you can just go to my website, drlotte.com, and then you click on upcoming events.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a link that will take you straight to that website. And that's the easiest way and the best way to sign up for that. And there's also another summit where I also speak about ancestral healing. And that one is called Live Your Most Authentic Life. Let me see.
Evolved life. I can't remember. We're both
live your most evolved life, and that's with Irene Weinberg, and she's the host of that. And again, there is amazing speakers on that. Both of those summits have really great speakers, and anybody who signs up, both of the summits are free. You can sign up for both of them going through my website. They'll be right underneath each other. Yeah. And you will learn a lot about different approaches to creating healing in your own life. There's all these different experts, and we all bring a different light, how to create healing.
Yeah, I've had a look at some of the speakers, and I have met some of them, and I know they're really good, and so I'm very much looking forward to being there and seeing what's actually happening and hearing people talk. And earlier you said, Lotte, about we're all unique, and recently I've been pushing out a little thing is about normal. So I mean, everybody feels they're normal, don't they? And there are actually 8 billion different forms of normal on planet Earth at the moment, because there are 8 billion of us. And every single one of those normals is unique. So, get your brains around that one as well, because it's important. We are unique, and we're all okay. We're all normal. We're all where we're supposed to be, with a bit of tweaking, with a bit of help.
Yeah.
And you deal with the physical stuff, deal with the mental stuff, deal with the emotional stuff as well. But because you're not like the next bloke, you're fine.
Yeah. That's what I tell people. Wherever you are, that's where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And whenever I used to ask the spirit guides, what am I doing? Give me a hint. What's next? Everything is as it should be. Yeah. And that would be my consistent answer until it really got hammered into my brain. Everything is as it should be. And that's how it is every single day. Yeah. Because we are divine, unique creatures, that we all have a purpose. Even though we think we don't have a purpose, we all have a purpose. We do. And sometimes people, feel, well, what is my purpose? You're living it. Sometimes we don't see it. It's sort of hidden from us. Yeah.
And I think that's where, I mean, if people want to find out more about their purpose, it's, go to people like you, Lotte, or come to people like me, and we will help you dig down and find this purpose, because it's the same as finding the roots of the illness that you're currently living with, the condition that you're currently living with. And for me, making friends with it. Yeah.
You have to dig down. Yeah. Sometimes. And I do a lot of that. Sometimes I get clients that, have been home for a while, or they just want to make a career change, and they're wondering, should I go this way or should I go that way? And, we talk about it, and I, work psychically and mediumistically as well. So it becomes an integration of everything. And depending on, sometimes, people worry about signing up for the correct session, because I work as a medical intuitive, medical medium, psychic and mediumship readings, and ancestral healing, spirit guides, etc. And I have all those sessions listed on my website. If you just go to drlotte.com and click on work spiritually with Dr. Lotte, all those different sessions will come up. So, but I tell people, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter so much. If we, we might start with a medical intuitive, and then halfway through, this is ancestral, and then it goes into the ancestral, the second half of it. And it doesn't matter, because we're going to take that session wherever it needs to go, in order to create healing for the client. So, don't worry about that so much. If they sign up for ancestral healing, they will get about 13 questions of, what is it? What is your issue? When did it start? And that way I will get a little bit of an insight into what it is that's troubling them beforehand. And so we can get a little bit more accomplished. And that's, you can just read on my website the different descriptions. But again, you don't have to fill that form out. If they sign up for a medical intuitive and it still goes to ancestral, we can still unravel those questions. So
yeah, and again, that is part of this integration, and because you've got all of this experience at your fingertips as well as at your back, and you can then be with the person where they are, not saying, oh, you signed up here for left-handed car driving or something.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No. It's all about you becoming the real you, isn't it?
Right. It's, living your authentic life, finding that within yourself, whatever that is, and uncovering that, because it is not until you find yourself that you will be happy in life. And that can be, again, something ancestral. And many times it's just hidden from us, because we think that, well, my childhood was great, I don't have any complaints, and we can't see it.
No.
And sometimes it's helpful to work with somebody like you or me to help uncover that. And it's once they create what I call the aha moment, the light bulb goes on. Now I see it. Now I understand why I'm having this issue, why I'm afraid of going after the job, why I'm afraid of changing careers. All of a sudden, that light goes on, and then you can put that at rest and you move on with your life. So it just creates this tremendous sense of peace and healing.
It does indeed. I totally agree. You've made me think of something, and if you don't mind, let me check. Yeah, I'm just going to get up and get something. You will recognize it, and I hope a lot of the listeners will as well. This is something I was given by one of the people who started me off 40 years, no, maybe 40 years ago, definitely.
I can't see what it says. Let's see. Okay, hold it still. Everybody needs a co-pilot. Yes.
Yep. And this is Snoopy.
Yes, little Snoopy.
And Woodstock.
That's so true. So true.
And he gave it to me, this lovely person. He gave it to me and he said, we all need a co-pilot. And I feel that's my job. And in many ways, I sort of feel, that's yours as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do, literally, working as a physician or working spiritually with people. I'm their co-pilot, helping them find their way or create healing in their life one way or another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lotte, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. And hopefully we can do it again, maybe later in the year or something.
Oh, yeah, I would love to.
That would be really great. And please, everybody, you will enjoy these summits. So even if you can only manage one, have a go at one. Thank you very much.
I believe you get to keep, believe you have access to it too for like 48 hours. If you miss,
even
somebody
better.
talking.
Great.
Yeah. And I think there's also a way you can buy the whole package and keep it forever kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're both a tremendous summit, so well worth your time. Yeah.
They will be indeed. So thank you very much, Lottie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been really fun, as ever. And thank you, everybody, for listening and joining me on this one. And this will be up on both my podcast and on YouTube. And it should be up today week, with a bit of luck, if my man who does all the tricks, all the techie tricks that I can't do, gets it all right for me. So goodbye for now, everybody. See you all again.